I've worked in Cascade search and rescue most of my adult life. Most of the time the job is routine. Lost hikers, twisted ankles, people who underestimated a trail or overestimated their daylight. The mountains aren't malicious, they're just indifferent. But every now and then we run into something that doesn't fit that tidy explanation. The case I'm about to tell you about happened in late October, close to the tail end of our busy season. The nights were cold enough to frost the ground, mornings smelled like wet cedar and the last rot of the berry bushes, and the gorge trails, those were always a little uneasy after dark. They run through tight canyon walls where sound behaves strangely. Footsteps roll and echo like someone's walking right behind you when they're not. The missing man was named Harry Caldwell. 52, lived alone, worked as a mechanic in a little river town that's basically a gas station, a bar, and a post office stuck between two ridges. He wasn't reckless or naive. He hiked these trails every weekend for years. We only knew he was missing because his truck sat at the river overlook lot 2 nights in a row. Rangers called us in. We found the first sign about half a mile down a switchback. Boot prints heading in, perfectly normal. The ground was packed with pine needles and early snow, so every footprint stood out like a signature. What was odd was the pattern. Harry's stride was steady, but something else paralleled him. The second set of tracks wasn't human. They were spaced far apart, heavy, and deep enough to push through the frost crust into the mud beneath. At first, we thought it could be a black bear. They roam through all the time, but bears don't walk in straight lines alongside a person's trail. They wander, they zigzag, they stop at bushes and logs. This one shadowed him almost perfectly, close enough that the prints cut into the same softened patches he stepped in minutes earlier. It bothered all of us, but we didn't say anything. We just kept following. The farther we went, the more the woods closed in. The gorge walls leaned overhead and swallowed sound. Even our boots felt muted on the ground, and the footprints, Harry's and the parallel ones, kept going the same direction, deeper into the canyon where the sunlight barely touched the moss. About 3 miles in, the tracks split. Harry's footprints drifted off the main trail and into a narrow side path, the kind barely used by anyone except deer. We found a scuff in the snow where he must have hesitated. Maybe he heard something, maybe he saw something, but he stepped off the trail, willingly. The second set of tracks didn't follow him. It stopped, right at the split. Weirdest thing I've ever seen. The prints just ended, 2 deep impressions in the frost and then nothing. No backtracking, no direction change, as if whatever made them just stood there and waited. We radioed in what we found, marked the site, and followed Harry's trail deeper into the side path. This was where the forest started to feel wrong. Not dangerous, just wrong in a way you can't articulate. Every SAR worker knows that feeling, the pressure in your gut that says you're walking into a place that doesn't want you there. A 1/4 mile in, we found the torn strap of Harry's day pack caught on a branch. Not ripped by teeth, just frayed like it snagged during a fall. But there was no sign of a fall around it, no slide marks, no heavy impact. It was placed almost gently, like someone hung it there. The temperature dropped sharply after that. Even our radios crackled and popped like something interfered with them. About 20 minutes later, we reached the end of the side path where it met the river gorge. The lookout point used to be fenced decades ago, but storms had taken out the rails. What remained was a 40-foot drop into white water. Harry's footprints led right to the edge and stopped. Not over, not slid, not scrambled, just stopped at the very lip of the cliff. We combed that area for hours, rappelled the gorge walls, scanned the rapids, everything. Nothing. It was like he stepped to the edge, stood there a long minute, and then ceased to exist. And that's when one of the rookies whispered, "Do you hear that?" We all paused. Somewhere deep in the trees behind us, we heard a single heavy footstep. One, then silence, then another, closer this time. They came slowly, spaced out, like something taking deliberate steps, not charging, not sneaking, just approaching. And each one felt like it sank into the ground, heavy enough to vibrate through the soil. We moved as one back toward the main trail, not running, not shouting. Half a mile later, we heard the last footstep, this one right where the prints had stopped at the trail split, right where it had waited. We didn't hear anything else after that. We never found Harry. Not one scrap of clothing, not a broken branch, nothing in the river, Nothing in the forest. Some of the guys think he slipped and fell into the rapids and the body got carried miles south. But if you'd been there that day, if you'd felt the air shift and heard those steps, you wouldn't believe that either. The forest took him, and whatever tracked him into the gorge let us walk out. I used to volunteer at a small fire lookout tower up in northern Idaho. Most people don't know that volunteers still rotate through a few of those old structures. Wooden shacks perched on high ridges, meant for watching lightning storms and early signs of wildfire. Some are gone now, collapsed or replaced by cameras. But the one I stayed at, Pike's Summit, still stood quiet and square against the sky. You get a very particular feeling spending nights up there. It's not loneliness exactly, more like you're the last lighted window in 100 miles of shadow. The forest stretches out in every direction, and you just float above it. Everyone I worked with said the same thing. You start to hear the land more clearly. Wind sounds like breathing. Owls sound like conversations. Every distant crack, branch, rockfall, tree shift comes in with this amplified weight. The missing person in this story was a fellow volunteer, a man named Jeremy Noakes, 38, ex-military, quiet, liked to read in his downtime. He hiked in from the fire road for his shift, planning to stay the full weekend alone. He signed the logbook Friday at 4:12 p.m., left a note for the next shift about weather patterns, and then vanished sometime between sunset and the next morning. No sign of struggle. No sign he left willingly. Just gone. The only real clue we had was the logbook entry before he disappeared. Before I tell you what he wrote, I should explain what the area behind the tower looks like. Pike's Summit sits on a rocky spine. On the north side, the ridge runs downhill into dense conifer forest, old and undisturbed. No trails, no campsites, just deep green silence. At night, it's a black slope that swallows moonlight. Jeremy's logbook entry was short. Heard someone talking on the north ridge, male voice, too deep to be any hiker. We'll check after dusk. That was it. We never figured out why he went alone into the dark after hearing a stranger's voice. Jeremy wasn't reckless. He wasn't curious like that. The official guess was he thought it was another volunteer or someone in trouble, but those woods are remote. There shouldn't have been anyone out there after sunset. When he didn't respond to radio call-ins the next morning, a ranger hiked up to check on him. The tower door was wide open. The lantern was still on, coffee mug half full, and the logbook lay open like someone had been reading it moments earlier. We launched a search immediately. I was there with 4 others, starting at daybreak. The ridge trail was easy enough until you hit the boulder field, and that's where we found the first odd sign. Jeremy's prints descended the rocks, and then paused, right at the edge of the tree line. There were scuff marks as if he'd stopped abruptly, turned, looked back toward the tower. Then another set of impressions nearby, not prints, more like deep, rounded impacts in the moss and soil, too far apart for a person, too heavy for a deer, and whatever made them didn't leave heel-to-toe patterns, just weight, like something stepped down with an immense mass and lifted straight back up again. Those impacts followed him. We found more of them deeper in the woods. They flanked his trail, never directly behind him, always off to the side like something pacing him silently, matching every step he took. The forest was dead quiet. No birds, no wind. It felt like the entire ridge was listening. About a quarter mile down, Jeremy's footprints suddenly shifted, like he'd started walking faster. His stride lengthened. He veered off the barely there game path and headed straight between the trunks. Whatever followed him paralleled his detour, the impact sinking deeper now, like it had closed distance. We didn't call out his name. None of us wanted to. The silence felt too heavy, too still, like if you spoke, something would answer. The ground sloped into a basin where the trees grew thicker. We found torn fabric there, caught high up on a splintered branch, 6 feet off the ground, a piece of Jeremy's flannel shirt. The weird part was the branch was peeled back, as if something brushed it aside, not snapped or clawed it. After that, the trail changed. Jeremy's footprints merged into a line of disturbed earth that looked more like he'd been carried or dragged, but not violently. There were no signs of struggle, no heel marks, no overturned foliage, just that weird trough in the soil where something large had passed, bending grass and moss. And then it all stopped, not faded, not scattered, stopped. In a small clearing where no disturbance should have existed, the ground was bare, moss flattened in a perfect oval. At the far edge, one massive impression pressed into the mud, deeper than anything we'd seen that day, a single step. To this day, I still don't understand how something could leave one track without leaving a direction of travel. No prints led away from it, no prints led into it, just that enormous solitary impression. The search lasted 3 days. Helicopters, dogs, hundreds of volunteers. But there was nothing else to find, no scent trail, no clothing, nothing left behind in the tower. His radio was still charging on the wall when we checked inside, but the creepiest part happened 2 nights after the search ended. Another lookout volunteer stationed at a different tower 14 miles away called in something strange. She reported hearing a man's voice outside her tower around 3 a.m. She thought it was a hiker at first. But the voice didn't call for help. It didn't say words she could understand. She said it sounded like someone imitating human speech, deep, slow, and wrong, like a throat not meant for language trying to fake it. She didn't open the door. And she swore, later on, that the footsteps she heard circling the tower weren't human either. Heavy, measured, pausing under the windows. Nothing was found there either. Jeremy Noakes remains missing. The official report says lost in wilderness terrain, but those of us who worked Pike's Summit know something else lives in that North Ridge timber. Something that watches the towers. Something that knows the sound of our voices and tries to mimic them. And sometimes, it chooses one of us to follow. I grew up in western Montana in a town so small the grocery store shared a building with the hardware shop. My family owned a stretch of wooded property out near the old floodplain. Most folks around there called it the marsh, even though the water had retreated decades ago. To me, it was just the place I wandered when I needed quiet. Wide, flat, open timber, a tangle of cottonwoods and willow, grass tall enough to hide in. When I got older, I started hiking the perimeter trail that looped the whole thing, 3 miles around, a long, easy circle that hugged the old water line. My dad took that walk every evening after work. He was the sort of person who could predict weather by the smell of the wind. I always felt safe with him. He moved through the woods like it was an extension of himself. He vanished on that loop trail when I was 22. No witnesses, no distress call. Just didn't come home from a walk he'd taken 1,000 times. You hear about people disappearing in national parks, mountain ranges, canyons, but hardly anyone mentions the smaller places, the private lands, the little trails where only locals go. I guess it's easier to lose someone where millions wander each year, harder to explain when it happens somewhere quiet. That was the spring everything changed. I still live near that property, still walk the same trail, mostly because I couldn't leave it alone. I wanted answers, or closure, or maybe just proof that the woods weren't hiding something from me. But every year, as the brush grows thicker and the bird calls get sparser, I feel the place settling into some older, colder version of itself. Like the marsh is returning in spirit, even if the water never comes back. This story isn't just about my dad, though. It's about the night I learned why he never made it home. It happened 2 summers after he disappeared. It was late July, one of those evenings that hums with heat even after the sun dips. I'd waited until dusk to walk the loop trail, hoping the shade would take the edge off. Fireflies bobbed near the tree line, and the whole woods smelled like wet soil after an afternoon storm. Perfect quiet. I remember thinking, if there was ever a night to feel peaceful out there, it was that one. Half a mile in, I stopped at the big cottonwood where my dad used to rest. The bark wore a notch in just the right shape for leaning your shoulder. I stood there a long minute, just breathing in the stillness. There was nothing unusual, nothing out of place, but I kept feeling like I was being held in someone's attention. Not watched exactly, more like the forest itself had turned toward me. The same faint, uncanny pressure I'd felt at the funeral when people turned to look at my family, an awareness I couldn't shake. I pushed on. The trail's west side always felt different. Something about the way the trees shifted into a denser tangle. The ground gets softer there, still rich with old marsh soil. When you walk across it, it doesn't crunch or crack. It sighs, like something gently resettling after each step. I was nearing the halfway point when I realized the birds had gone quiet. Not just less active, silent. Too silent. From that point forward, The woods carried a hollow ringing, as if sound had drained from the air. I tried to tell myself it was just the heat or nighttime settling in, but the quiet wasn't natural. It felt imposed, like a held breath. A few minutes later, I noticed the smell. It drifted in so lightly I almost missed it. Something earthy and sour, like wet stone or overturned mud. I'd smelled it before. That was what scared me. When the search team walked the property after my dad vanished, a few of them mentioned catching a minerals and animal musk odor in the north quadrant. I'd brushed it off as swamp gas or deer bedding, but now the scent curled right into my lungs. I slowed down without meaning to. My footsteps sounded wrong. Not loud, just too isolated, like they were happening in a vacuum. The trail felt narrower. The trees felt taller. By then, the fireflies had disappeared. No flickers, no insects buzzing, just this blank, breathless dark. That was when I heard the first sound that didn't belong. A soft, measured thump somewhere behind me, heavy enough to be felt rather than heard. Not running, not approaching, just existing. A single step settling into the soil. I didn't turn around. I don't know why. Maybe some instinct told me not to. Maybe I didn't want to see anything in that dim light. I kept walking. Another thump, closer. I said my dad's name under my breath, not expecting an answer, just defaulting to the person who'd always made me feel safe on that trail. Something shifted behind me. A slow drag, like weight shifting from one leg to another. Not human. I knew it in my chest the same way you know lightning is about to strike even before it hits. My breathing got tight. I remembered something from my childhood. A night when I was 8 and my dad came home from that exact trail earlier than usual. He'd been jumpy all evening, sat with his back to the wall. When I asked what happened, he said, "Sometimes the marsh isn't empty, sometimes it listens." I hadn't thought about that in years. I walked faster. The sound followed. Not constantly, just once every few dozen of my steps, like something pacing me from deep inside the trees, sinking its distance to mine, keeping parallel, matching my direction, always unseen. The air thickened. The heat felt wrong now, suffocating rather than warm. I knew I was being followed long before the next sound confirmed it. A low, almost inaudible exhale carried through the trees. Long, slow, heavy. Something breathing. I snapped a look sideways. Nothing. Just dark trunks and brush. But the brush trembled, not from wind, but from something stepping back deeper into shadow. I felt like I'd crossed into a place I wasn't supposed to be, a place that remained untouched for a reason. Halfway through the loop, there's an old wooden footbridge, just a few planks across a shallow ravine. When I finally reached it, I paused, gripping the rail. My hands were shaking. I turned, very slowly, to look back down the path. The trail behind me was empty, but the smell was stronger, heavy, damp, something like fur and stone. I felt washed in a way that had weight behind it, like pressure on my shoulders, like someone leaning over me without touching. I whispered, "Dad," again. Reflex, fear, maybe a plea. The woods responded with a sound so faint, I almost convinced myself it wasn't there. A soft click of teeth. Not the snap of a twig, not a branch, teeth. I stumbled over the bridge and kept going. From that point on, the pacing stopped. No footsteps, no breath, nothing. The silence stretched so long I started to doubt myself. Maybe it was an elk. Maybe it was just nerves and memory and grief tangled into illusion. But then I saw the prints, not human, not bare. Deep, rounded impressions in the soft soil at the trail edge. Each one spaced too far apart to match anything on 4 legs. And they stood in a line, a single file, like something walked upright. They weren't fresh, but they weren't old either. Not more than a day or two. And one of them, the deepest one, angled slightly toward the center of the trail, right where my dad usually walked. I followed the loop the rest of the way with my eyes fixed forward, refusing to look anywhere but ahead. When I finally stepped out of the woods and into the clearing near our old barn, the world filled with sound again. Crickets, leaves, a distant dog barking. It was like the quiet had been a physical barrier I crossed through. I didn't sleep that night. 2 days later, I went back with a game camera, set it low, aimed it down the trail. I checked it every week for 2 months. It captured nothing. No animals, no wind events, no shadows. Just an occasional disruption. Frames where the data corrupted, strips of static like something passed too close for the lens to handle. The same kind of disruption the search team found in my dad's phone recordings after they recovered it from his truck. He'd left the phone behind on the day he disappeared, but the week before, one of his videos had a glitch, a brief warble of audio, and then something breathing close to the mic. I still walk the loop trail some evenings, not looking for it, just trying to understand. I think whatever took my dad didn't drag him off screaming. It didn't need to. It moved slow. It watched. It learned his routine. It followed until the moment was right. And sometimes, when the birds go quiet and the air shifts around me, I feel that same awareness. Heavy, patient, waiting, like the marsh remembers. Like the marsh isn't done. For most of my life, I thought camping alone was the purest kind of peace you could get, especially in the mountains east of Mount Hood, where the air always smells like cold earth and sun-baked bark. I'd head up there every autumn once the crowds thinned out, usually right before the first real snow. There's a little horseshoe-shaped valley off a Forest Service road I've driven for years. Nothing remarkable about it. Just a shallow bowl lined with firs and larch, a creek running through one side, and flat ground perfect for a tent. I never saw anyone else camp there. It wasn't on any official map, and the road to reach it was rough enough to keep most folks away. The last trip I took there happened 3 years ago. I haven't been back since. I arrived late in the afternoon. The light was soft and gold, falling through the branches in long stripes. Everything was still. Even the usual breeze that comes down from the ridge wasn't moving. I remember thinking how quiet it felt. A good kind of quiet, like the woods were settling down for the evening. I set up my tent close to the creek and built a small fire just to warm dinner. Nothing fancy, just routine. The smell of pine smoke drifted along the water. I listened to it rush past the rocks while the sun dipped behind the ridge, turning the valley blue. Right around dusk, something shifted. I don't mean a noise or movement. It was more like the woods holding still, holding their breath. No birds calling in the trees, no rustling. Even the creek felt quieter, like the sound wasn't carrying as far. I remember looking up, fork halfway to my mouth, wondering if a storm was rolling in. But the sky was clear. It wasn't threatening at all, just strange, a kind of expectant stillness. I finished eating and tossed a couple more sticks onto the fire. The flames rose a little, brightening the clearing, but the weird quiet stayed. By the time I zipped myself into my sleeping bag, the silence was so thick it felt like a blanket over the valley. I'm not a nervous person, and the woods have never scared me, but something about that stillness sank into my chest and stayed there. I dozed off anyway. Sometime deep in the night, I woke up without knowing why. No snap of a branch, no footsteps. Just that feeling you get when your body decides something changed in your surroundings. Everything was pitch black except a faint glow from the dying fire outside. I didn't move at first. Just listened. There was nothing. No wind, no insects, no creek. The silence was absolute. Then, slowly, I noticed something odd. A soft tremor under the ground. Not shaking, more like weight being set down somewhere far off. A single distant thump that traveled through the soil and settled under my spine. I lay there, breathing shallow, not scared, just alert. A minute passed, 2, then another faint thump. Closer this time. It wasn't rhythmic, it wasn't threatening. It felt like something large walking with long breaks between steps, something pacing a slow perimeter around the valley. I unzipped the tent part way and peered out. The fire had burned down to embers, glowing faintly in the dark. The clearing looked normal. The creek was a motionless line of silver, but the trees surrounding the camp seemed darker than they should have been, as if they were leaning together, blocking out the sky. Another thump, heavier now. It came from somewhere beyond the creek, maybe 50, 60 yards away. I didn't see anything move, but the dark on that side felt thicker, like something stood just inside it. I listened so hard my ears hurt. Nothing came out of the brush. No glowing eyes, no breathing. Just that sense, like the forest had rearranged itself, and something new occupied the spaces between the trees. After a while, the thump stopped, The silence stretched wide and long. I kept watching the tree line until my eyes burned, but nothing happened. Eventually, the heaviness of the moment drifted away, replaced by that same strange stillness from earlier, the feeling that the valley was waiting for something. Sleep pulled me under again. When I woke up, it was early dawn. Faint blue light filtered through the tent walls. The fire pit was cold. The quiet had lifted. Birds were calling again. The creek sounded normal. For a few minutes, it was easy to believe I'd dreamed the whole thing. Then I stepped out of my tent. The ground around my camp was untouched. No tracks, no disturbed brush. But across the creek, directly opposite my tent, the dew had been pressed down in a line. Not footprints, not paw prints, just a long, subtle depression in the grass, as if something heavy had stood there for a long time, watching. I crossed the little log I'd placed over the creek the day before and knelt beside the disturbed grass. The ground was cold beneath it, colder than the rest of the valley floor, like the weight had held the chill of night long after dawn. Whatever made that impression didn't linger long. The trail of flattened grass ended just a few yards into the trees, where the shadows thickened. After that, nothing. No broken branches, no drag marks, no prints. But the smell lingered. A faint mineral scent, like wet stone mixed with something faintly musky, something warm-blooded. It wasn't unpleasant, just unfamiliar. I stayed still for a long time, letting the morning settle around me. The birds were still calling. The breeze finally moved through the valley. Everything looked normal again, ordinary, safe. But the feeling from the night before, that slow, heavy presence pacing the perimeter, stayed with me. I packed up calmly, took my time, folded the tent, doused the fire ring, crossed the creek one last time. The valley looked exactly the way it always had, and yet not at all. Something had passed through it. Something that moved quietly on feet too heavy to mistake for anything common. Something that took its time. Something that didn't need to come close to make itself known. I've camped dozens of places since then, but I never returned to that horseshoe-shaped valley. Not because I'm afraid of what happened there, but because the woods felt like they were telling me, in their own slow way, that whatever walked the valley that night wasn't there by accident, and it didn't want company. When I was in my 20s, I used to help the county do winter road surveys. Nothing official, just seasonal work they gave to locals who knew the back roads well. The job was simple: drive the old Forest Service routes before the heavy snow came in, flag down trees, note washouts, report anything dangerous before plows reached that deep into the mountains. Most of the time it was boring. Beautiful, but boring. Miles and miles of quiet forest, long stretches where the only sound was your own tires grinding over frost. Occasionally you'd see elk or a stray moose. Sometimes you'd find tire tracks from hunters who got deeper into the backcountry than they should have. Nothing strange, but there was one route that always felt a little off. People called it the Old Snow Road. The county number for it was FS 78, but nobody used that name. It was a narrow gravel strip that ran along the spine of the foothills, dipping into bowls full of fir and cedar. Most winters, sections of it washed out completely. It was the last road anyone cleared, and the first road everyone forgot about. The weird thing wasn't the isolation. That was normal out there. It was the quiet. Even in summer, when the forests buzz and chatter, old snow roads sucked sound out of the air. I don't know how else to put it. You could stand outside your truck, listen to the wind brushing the treetops, and somehow still feel like everything was muted, like someone pressed a hand over your ears. Locals joked the road was watched. They didn't mean cameras. They meant the woods felt aware of you in a way that wasn't hostile, but wasn't welcoming either, like someone was deciding whether you should be there. I always brushed that off as superstition, until the night I got stuck up there alone. It was early November, right when the first real frost settles in. I'd spent the afternoon marking small rockfalls along the ridge. The sun set fast, faster than I expected, and by the time I started heading back, the road behind me had already turned the color of slate. The temperature dropped so quickly my breath came out like steam. 5 miles in, I hit the washout. A deep, fresh rut running straight across the road, maybe 10 feet long. The kind carved by water tearing through the hillside. It wasn't there earlier that day. If I'd been paying better attention, I might have eased around it. but I didn't see it until too late. My truck's front tires dipped in and the frame slammed down hard, the right tire wedged deep into the rut. When I put it into reverse, the whole truck just rocked back and forth. I was stuck. The air was already getting colder. Night was coming fast. I radioed the county, but reception out there was always spotty. The message went through, but nobody could reach me until morning. I'd have to spend the night in the truck. That wasn't unusual. I'd slept in worse places. I shut off the engine, locked the doors, wrapped myself in the emergency blanket, and waited. For a long time, nothing happened. The forest was still. That strange old snow road stillness that felt more like a presence than an absence. The trees didn't sway. No animals called out. The stars were sharp above the ridge, bright enough to cast faint shadows. I must have dozed off, because when I opened my eyes again, the truck windows had fogged from my breath, and the woods were different. Not louder, not more active, just present in a way I could feel in my lungs. Like waking up to someone standing in your bedroom. I sat up slowly, letting my eyes adjust. That was when I heard it, the first sound since dusk, a deep, low thump, far away but heavy, like something putting its weight down on frozen soil. Then silence. Then another thump, closer this time. The rhythm was strange, not steady footsteps, just single impacts, spaced far apart, like whatever made them took its time between each step. I held my breath without meaning to. It wasn't fear, not exactly, more like the cautious quiet you use when something large is moving outside your field of vision. A third thump came, this one close enough I felt it faintly through the truck frame. I turned off my interior lights, so the cab went completely dark. The only glow came from the faint line of moonlight on the dash. Outside, the trees were just silhouettes, tall, unmoving, black against black. Then I noticed something I'd never heard before on that road. Breathing. Soft, not labored. Slow. A deep inhale that stretched long into the dark, followed by a long exhale that drifted through the trees like warm air against cold. Not human breathing. Too low, too resonant, like it came from a chest twice the size of mine. I stayed still. Even small movements felt too loud. The breathing wasn't coming closer, but it wasn't leaving either. It lingered somewhere just beyond my sight line, on the tree line to my right, near where the ridge dipped toward a ravine. Minutes passed, then more minutes. The breathing stayed steady, patient, unhurried. I listened so long that my sense of time slipped. My mind drifted between alertness and that drowsy state you fall into right before sleep. The kind where every sound feels magnified. That's probably why I didn't notice at first when the breathing stopped. Not faded. Stopped. Silence returned with a weight that made my ears ring. I don't know how long it lasted. The forest around Old Snow Road held still like it was waiting for something. I didn't dare turn on a light. I didn't dare crack the window. I stayed curled in the blanket, trying to be part of the stillness. It didn't feel threatening, just aware. Eventually, some part of me drifted off again. When I woke, it was dawn. Frost coated the windshield. The trees looked harmless again, tall, quiet, indifferent. I stepped out to stretch, scanning the ridge without expecting anything. But I found something. Across the road, just a few yards from the washout, the frost had been pressed down in wide ovals. Not prints, not defined shapes, just deep, heavy impressions in the ice-crusted soil where something large had stood. 3 impressions, all spaced far apart. As if whatever stood there shifted its weight slowly during the night, adjusting its stance while watching me. The rest of the frost was untouched. No approach trail, no exit trail. Just those 3 heavy depressions. I stood there a long time, waiting for the woods to feel normal. They didn't. Even when the county truck arrived mid-morning to tow me out, the air still carried that faint scent. Cold stone mixed with something organic, something warm. I didn't mention the impressions to the crew. I didn't know how to explain them. They pulled me free, and we drove back down the ridge. As soon as we hit pavement, the old quiet lifted. Birds returned. Wind brushed the branches. Everything felt normal again. But the whole drive home, I kept thinking about the breathing. It wasn't curious. It wasn't territorial. It was just there. Calm, steady, as if whatever stood in the shadows knew I wasn't going anywhere until morning, like it understood I was stuck. Like it watched over the road the same way locals always said. I haven't taken an old snow road assignment since then. Not out of fear, just out of respect. Some places are meant to remain still. Some things are meant to move through that stillness without disturbance. And sometimes, if you're quiet enough, they let you hear them pass. I used to rent a tiny cabin every December, right before the holiday rush swallowed the town. It sat on the slope of an old ski hill that shut down years before I was born. Just a small, weathered place built from cedar and insulated with nothing but stubbornness. No running water, no electricity, just a wood stove and a creaky cot by the window. Most winters, the snow got too heavy for anyone to reach it except on foot or snowmobile. The forest around it stayed quiet all season long, quiet in the way only winter can make things quiet, when sound doesn't travel far because the cold presses everything down. I liked it there. It was a place where nothing demanded attention. I'd chop firewood during the day, make simple meals at night, and watch the light fade early through the trees. The cabin sat near the edge of a tree line, a sharp border where the old ski run started. The run was swallowed by shrubs and baby birches now, but the slope was still clear enough to see all the way down to the valley floor. In summer, it probably would have looked lush and gentle. But in winter, the slope transformed into a long, pale corridor framed by black trunks, the kind that made you feel like you were looking at something unfinished, like the land was waiting for someone to return. My family used that cabin for decades, and for decades people mentioned hearing odd noises at night. Not scary, just strange. Dull, heavy thumps, long exhalations that carried strangely through the trees. Sometimes a soft, rhythmic sway of branches when the air was perfectly still. Old mountain talk, nothing to worry about. That's what I thought too, until the year I stayed up there longer than usual, long enough to hear the woods move in ways I'd never heard before. It was the winter after my mother passed. I didn't want to be in town, wrapped up in grief and holiday cheer clashing awkwardly. So I packed up, hiked to the cabin, and settled in for what I thought would be a quiet week. The first night passed in warm firelight and stillness. Snow fell steadily, whispering against the cabin roof. I slept easily. The second night was even quieter. The cold had deepened enough that the trees stood motionless and brittle. The world felt as narrow as a blanket. Nothing odd. It wasn't until the third night that something changed. I'd gone outside late to shake snow off the woodpile tarp. The moon was full that night, bright enough to cast shadows across the slope. I remember seeing the tree line below me, dark branches lining the white expanse like ink on parchment. My breath fogged out in slow curls. The snow under my boots gave a soft packed crunch, and then the wind stopped. Not slowed, stopped. The cold air hung still around me, frozen in place. And in the same instant, I felt something subtle shift down the slope. Not a movement, not a presence, just an awareness, like the forest had turned its attention upward toward the cabin. I froze without knowing why. Far below, near the bottom of the slope, a single tree shuddered. Just one, not a gust sweeping through the branches, not deer brushing past. A firm, deliberate shake, a single controlled motion that started at the trunk and rippled outward. I listened. The woods held their breath. Another tree shook, higher up the slope this time. Then nothing. I backed toward the cabin, never looking away from the tree line. The snow felt too loud under my boots. The door hinges felt too sharp when I pulled them shut. But once inside, with the fire crackling, everything seemed normal again. Silence returned. Warmth wrapped around the room. I convinced myself the snow load was shifting on the branches. Happens all the time in winter. Still, I didn't sleep easily. The next night, the fourth night, I woke up before dawn to a strange sound. At first, I thought it was the stove settling, wood popping in the iron belly. But the sound didn't match that familiar pattern. It was lower, slower, a deep, heavy thump, like something large stepping into compacted snow. One thump, silence. Then another. Not approaching, not wandering, just adjusting weight from one place to another, like something standing still but shifting subtly, as if settling in for a long watch. The sound came from the slope outside the cabin, not right beside it, maybe 20, 30 yards down, I lay in my cot, listening. The breaths I heard weren't mine. And what scared me wasn't the volume, it was how quiet they were. Long, steady inhales, slow, heavy exhales. Not in any hurry, not searching, just breathing. Just being. Eventually, the breathing stopped, or maybe I drifted off. When I woke, sunlight filled the cabin and everything felt normal again. I didn't go down the slope that day. I chopped wood and read from an old book I'd stashed in the cabin years ago. Outside, the world looked harmless. Soft, bright snow, quiet trees, animal tracks crossing the lower branches. No reason to worry. But I couldn't shake the feeling I'd been listened to all night. That evening, the fifth night, the forest made itself known again. I was seated by the window, writing in a small notebook. The fire had burned low. The moon was up. The slope gleamed pale and faintly blue under its light. As I wrote, something in the corner of my vision changed, a shape moving at the tree line, not stepping out, just shifting. Slow enough and subtle enough that, for a moment, I thought it was a tree swaying. Except nothing else moved, not a single branch. The air was completely still. Then the shape settled back into stillness, perfectly still, too still to be wind. I didn't approach the window, didn't lean closer. I just watched it quietly, letting my eyes adjust. The shape didn't move again, didn't come closer, didn't retreat. It was simply there, a darker silhouette among the trees. I can't tell you how long I watched, maybe minutes, maybe an hour. Time stretched strangely in that silence. Finally, the fire died down enough that the cabin got cold. I stood to put another log in. When I turned back to the window, the shape was gone. No movement, no departure, no sound. Just gone. The snow on the slope was unbroken the next morning. No footprints. But the lower branches where I'd seen the shape were stripped clean of frost, like something tall had brushed against them or leaned close for a moment. I left the cabin the next day. Not running, not frightened, just aware that the winter woods weren't mine to sit in anymore. Something had claimed that slope for itself during those long nights. Something old, patient, and immense. I still rent the cabin some years, but only in spring or summer when the snow melts and the land feels young again. Winter belongs to whatever stands in the tree line, breathing steady, shaking the trees one at a time, wandering the slopes without leaving prints. Whatever watched me from the cold, and whatever waited for the night to fall, quiet enough that it could move without sound. When I was younger, before I knew better, I used to hike a trail called Copper Hollow. It wasn't a real trail, more like an old mining road the forest kept trying to swallow. The county never maintained it, and most people didn't even know it existed. It wound through a narrow gulch with high walls on both sides, the kind of place where daylight faded early and every sound felt like it floated in from someplace else. The whole area had a reputation, not a dramatic one, more like a quiet suggestion people repeated without wanting to elaborate. Old-timers said the woods in that gulch shifted funny. Hunters said they heard things pacing the ridge above them. Nobody ever offered details. They just said it with a shrug and walked away. I never believed any of it. Not until I walked the hollow in late autumn and learned what it meant for a forest to feel wrong. It was mid-November, cold, quiet. The kind of day where the sun stayed low and the air smelled like frozen dirt. I'd only meant to walk for an hour or two and check on some old survey stakes I'd flagged years before. The entrance to the trail was just a narrow break in the tree line. Nothing special. But the moment I stepped through it, the temperature dropped noticeably, not enough to be shocking, just a subtle, immediate reduction, like the air inside the hollow had been stored in shadow all day. I kept walking. The farther I went, the more the sound changed. Not the kind of quiet you get from solitude. This was something else. A deep, heavy quiet that sat low to the ground. Even my footsteps felt muted. Not soft, but swallowed, like the forest absorbed the sound before it could echo. About 20 minutes in, I realized I hadn't heard a single bird or squirrel since entering the hollow. Not one. That was when a strange thing happened. I heard a branch snap behind me. Clear, sharp, like someone stepped on it with a lot of weight. I stopped and turned. Nothing was on the trail. Nobody. The brush stood still. The ridge above me was empty, but the sound hung in the air longer than it should have, as if the gulch didn't know how to release it. I didn't scare easily back then, so I kept walking. The trail dipped lower into the gulch, winding between cedar roots and old mine tailings. Every few minutes I'd hear something faint behind me, not footsteps, not breathing, just presence. The feeling of someone walking where you'd walked moments earlier. The deeper I went, the more the air felt dense, heavy. The smell changed too, faintly metallic, like cold iron and old stone. It reminded me of the inside of an abandoned mine, places where time seemed to stand still. Eventually, I reached a wide clearing where the old mining shack used to stand. The shack had collapsed decades ago, and only the foundation stones remained. I'd always liked that spot, but on that particular day, the clearing felt colder than the rest of the hollow. The air had a kind of weight to it, thick enough that my chest tightened. I stepped onto the remains of the foundation. The moment my boot touched the stone, the forest reacted. Everything, absolutely everything, went silent. Then, from somewhere up the ridge, a long, low creaking sound drifted through the trees. Not like wood bending in the wind, more like the groan of something shifting its weight after a long stillness. I stood very still. The creaking stopped. Then, from the opposite ridge, came the soft impact of something very heavy stepping into packed earth. Not a deer, not an elk, not even a bear. The sound carried differently, deeper, more deliberate. Something was above me. Watching the clearing, I backed off the foundation stones. The second my foot hit the dirt, another sound echoed through the hollow. A long, slow exhale from somewhere higher on the ridge. Not a snort, not steam, a breath, a massive breath. Slow, deep, heavy. I didn't run, not because I was brave, because something in my body knew running was the wrong thing to do. Instead, I walked the trail back the way I came. The forest stayed silent, almost reverent. Every few minutes I'd hear a single step in the snow above me, just one, each time closer, not chasing. Matching my pace with long pauses between, as if whatever watched me didn't need to hurry, as if it had all the time in the world, as if it wanted me to know it was there without ever letting me see it. Halfway out of the hollow, something new began, a low, rhythmic clicking, not insects, not branches. It sounded like teeth tapping softly together. Pause, click, pause. Slow, steady, patient. Every time I stopped walking, the clicking stopped too. Every time I moved, it resumed. I kept my eyes forward. Near the mouth of the hollow, the air suddenly warmed, only by a few degrees, but sharply enough that I knew I'd crossed some invisible threshold. The scent of metal faded. The weight in the air lifted. The forest felt normal again. Birds returned. Wind brushed my jacket. When I reached the tree line, I turned around. The trail behind me was empty. But on a moss-covered stone not far into the hollow, the frost had melted away in a perfect oval, as if something enormous had stood there recently and radiated just enough warmth to erase the ice. I never walked Copper Hollow again. Over the years, I've heard other hikers mention strange things out there. Heavy footsteps where no one should be. Long, deliberate breaths echoing down the ridges. Teeth clicking in the cold. Always slow. Always patient. Never chasing. Whatever lives in that gulch doesn't want to be seen. It just wants you to know you're not alone, even when the forest pretends you are. There's a trail near the southern edge of the Olympic Peninsula that most maps don't bother marking. It's not closed exactly, just forgotten. A thin, uneven path that cuts between two ridges before dropping into a cedar flat that locals call the Threshold. Nobody agrees on who named it or why. Some say it's because the old-growth timber makes a perfect natural arch. Others say it's because animals avoid the place. And some, the ones who don't like talking about it, will only say the name was earned. I'd heard the stories my whole life. My grandfather used to warn me not to camp anywhere near that section of forest. He'd say, in his low voice, "The woods change there. They're not like everywhere else." As a kid, I thought he meant the weather. As an adult, I learned he didn't. The last time I walked that path was during late winter, when the snow was patchy and the soil underneath stayed damp and cold. I planned to do a loop around the lower ridge, nothing ambitious, just a long, quiet walk. The first half hour was pleasant. Soft bird song, distant water, the cedar smell that always hits right before spring comes back. The trail was mostly forgotten, but my boots found the old grooves easily enough. Then the air changed. It happened suddenly, like stepping from a warm room into a root cellar. One moment the forest felt open and alive, and the next it felt compressed, dense, heavy. The scent of cedar faded under something older, a cold, mineral smell that reminded me of caves and deep water. The birds stopped, not gradually, not bit by bit. They stopped all at once like someone cut a wire. I slowed down without thinking. A few steps later, I reached the start of the threshold, a place where two massive cedars grew so close their trunks almost touched. The canopy above them formed a dark arch, bending the light into a dim green shadow. Even when the sun was high, that spot was gloomy. Everyone who'd ever warned me told me the same thing. If you pass the cedars, walk all the way through. Don't stop. Don't turn around. I don't know why I ignored that. Curiosity, maybe. Or stubbornness. I stepped beneath the arch. The air was colder on the other side. Not wind, cold, still. So still that I could hear my own pulse in my ears. The ground was covered in thick moss, darker than any I'd seen before. When I stepped on it, it didn't spring back, just sagged like old fabric. A few yards in, I realized the forest around me wasn't moving, not a stir, not a shift. Even the branches looked frozen in place. And the silence felt alive, heavy, listening. A strange thought slipped into my mind, gentle, like something placing a hand on the back of my neck. You shouldn't be here. Not words, not a voice, just a feeling with meaning attached. I kept walking. The trail narrowed until it barely existed, just a single track where the moss was pressed flatter. I realized I hadn't seen any animal sign at all. No scat, no tracks, no broken branches, not even insects. The threshold didn't host life. It tolerated it. A faint sound drifted through the trees then. Not from behind me, not from ahead. Somewhere deep to the left. A soft, low knock, like someone tapping a stick gently against a hollow trunk. Knock, pause, knock, long pause, knock. I stopped breathing for a moment, listening. The rhythm wasn't random. It was steady, intentional, patient. I told myself it was a woodpecker, even though it wasn't sharp or quick enough for a bird. I kept moving. The knocking followed me, always distant, always from the same direction, not closing in, not retreating, just keeping pace with me. Every few minutes, it would pause. During those pauses, the silence thickened. I could feel something waiting inside. The deeper I went, the darker the trees became. They weren't dead, they were just wrong. Their bark was too dark, almost charred-looking. Their branches grew in long, narrow angles, like they'd been reaching for something that wasn't sunlight. Then I reached the center of the threshold. A wide, circular clearing, covered in pale moss and framed by towering cedars. No underbrush, no fallen logs, just a bare, empty circle, too perfect to be shaped by nature. The air in that clearing felt like it had been sitting still for centuries. My skin prickled. I wanted to leave. Every instinct in me wanted to turn around and get out fast. But the old warnings returned to me. Don't stop. Don't turn around. Walk all the way through. So I did. Halfway across the clearing, something shifted in the trees behind me. Not a step, not a breath. A presence, a weight. The kind of awareness you feel from something massive, something standing still but filling the space with its size alone. I kept walking, slow and steady, never looking back. The knocking resumed. But this time, it came from directly behind me, no longer distant. Knock, knock. 3 taps, soft, like something slow, huge and patient was testing the sound of the trunks behind me. My spine tightened so hard I thought I'd be sick. I didn't speed up. I kept walking exactly the way you'd walk if a bear was behind you. Calm, deliberate, pretending not to be prey. When I reached the far side of the clearing, the air grew warmer, just enough to feel real again. I passed between 2 cedar trunks that mirrored the entrance. The moment I stepped beyond them, the knocking sound returned. Wind stirred the branches. Life restarted like someone flipped a switch. I didn't look back, not once. When I reached the main road, I felt something lift off me, a pressure I hadn't realized was clinging to my shoulders. I don't know what stands inside the threshold. I don't know if it watches everyone who passes or only the ones who don't belong. But I know this. Whatever was behind me in that clearing was tall. It was silent. It was patient. And it had been waiting a very, very long time. I don't hike that region anymore. And if I ever have to pass those cedars again, I won't be stopping, not even for a second. I used to work nights driving a shuttle truck between two trailhead parking lots along a forest road in Northern California. Simple job: pick up hikers who misjudged distance, help tourists who wandered too far, make sure nobody got stuck after gates closed. Most nights were uneventful. A few late campers, a stray group of backpackers, except one stretch of the road always put a knot in my stomach. Mile marker 3. Just a plain wooden post beside a bend in the road where the forest grew tight on both sides. The trees leaned inward there, like they'd been blown toward the road and stayed that way. Every driver I worked with said they felt something strange at that curve, like the headlights dimmed a little, or the silence pressed in too close. Nobody talked about it. We all just drove faster through that bend. The night everything changed started out calm. Cold, clear sky, a bright moon over the ridge. I had an empty truck and a thermos of coffee, driving the loop one more time before heading home. Around 1:30 a.m., just as I approached mile marker 3, my radio crackled with static, loud and sharp, like someone scraping metal. It was so sudden I jumped. The radio hadn't made a sound in hours. I lifted it off the dash. The static cut out. Behind it came a single noise. A breath. Not human. Too low. Too deep. It filled the cab like someone was exhaling inches from my ear. Then the hair on my arms stood up instantly. The truck felt colder. I slowed down without meaning to. My headlights washed over the trees at the bend, tall trunks tight together, their branches swallowing the moonlight, and then I saw something on the right shoulder. Not quite. A tall shape stood between the trees, just beyond the edge of the ditch. I couldn't make out its features, only that it was massive, taller than any person, broad shoulders, long arms hanging low, almost touching the ground, completely still, too still. My headlights barely reached it, but I saw just enough to know it wasn't a trick of the trees. It was facing the road, facing me. I didn't stop the truck, didn't even slow all the way down. I just eased along the curve, pretending I hadn't noticed a thing. The cab felt smaller and smaller as I passed the shape, like the truck was shrinking and the forest was closing in. As I rolled forward, the shape shifted, not stepping out, not following, just like it tilted its head as I went by, keeping me in its line of sight. The air in the truck got hard to breathe. My chest tightened. My hands shook on the wheel. When I cleared the bend, I checked the mirror. Nothing was behind me. But the forest on both sides felt darker now, heavier, as if that shape was moving with the road somehow, staying just out of sight. I kept driving. Mile marker 4 came and went. Then, half a mile later, my headlights flickered, not off, just dimmed, like something stepped between them and the trees for a split second. My stomach dropped. I looked at the road. Then something hit the side of the truck. Not hard, not violent, just a soft, heavy impact, like a palm pressing flat against the metal. Followed it. Slow, steady, something brushing its hand across the length of the truck as it paced me from the dark. I didn't turn my head. I didn't look. I pressed the gas, just enough to pull ahead without drawing attention. The dragging kept up for 10, maybe 12 seconds. Then it stopped, completely. The silence after that felt wrong. Too wide, too expectant. I kept going until I reached the trailhead station. I parked under the floodlight, turned the engine off, and let the warmth of the world return. For a while I didn't move. I just stared at the steering wheel. Eventually I got out and walked around the truck with a flashlight. The metal on the passenger side looked normal, no dents, no scrapes. But the frost was disturbed, not wiped away, not smudged. 5 long impressions in the thin layer of ice, uneven, spaced far apart. Not fingers exactly, just places where something warm rested against the metal. Big places. Wide. Too wide. I didn't report what happened. Nobody ever did. But I never drove that road again at night. And sometimes, when I think about that slow drag across the truck, I wonder if mile marker 3 is more than a bend in the forest. Maybe it's a doorway. A place where something tall and patient steps close enough to study whoever passes, deciding in its own quiet way whether to let them keep going or follow them home. There's a trailhead in northern Utah I used to visit every winter. Nothing special about it, just a metal cattle gate across a dirt road, a small map board, and a narrow parking area carved out of the trees. In summer it was busy, but in winter it sat empty for months. Locals warned me about that place in passing tones. Not "don't go there" warnings, more like just don't stay too long after dark. They never said why. Every so often, someone would mention hearing voices in the tree line, or the sound of something big moving parallel to the road, or footsteps in the snow where no tracks ever appeared. But it was always vague, always distant. Nobody wanted to talk about the details. The gate itself was old. Thick steel pipe welded into a makeshift barrier. It didn't keep anyone out. You could walk right around it. It just marked the boundary between the parking area and the forest. But if you stood near it long enough, you'd notice how strange the woods felt on the other side. The darkness pooled differently there. Thicker, almost liquid. Even your breath sounded quieter in that direction. One night, I decided to stay late. A snowstorm had passed an hour earlier, leaving everything powdered and fresh white. The air was sharp enough to sting my lungs. My headlights cut through the dark like thin blades. I only meant to walk for a bit, half a mile out. Nothing ambitious. I parked by the gate and stepped out. The cold swallowed my sound instantly. No crunch, no echo, just silence. The trailhead map made a faint ticking noise as it cooled in the night air. Beyond the gate, the forest stood still. I walked maybe 50 yards down the path when I felt it, the sense of being observed, a slow awareness brushing across my back, like eyes adjusting to find me. I turned. Nothing was on the trail. Nothing moved. But the gate looked different in the dark. Not physically, it was the same metal pipe, but its silhouette felt wrong, like something tall was standing beside it, a shadow that wasn't there before. I stared for a long moment, trying to separate imagination from reality. The mind plays tricks in the dark. I knew that. I repeated it like a mantra. I turned back toward the woods. That's when I heard it. A long, slow intake of breath. Not from the trees, not from the trail. From behind me. From the gate. I froze. The breath was deep, impossibly deep, like air filling a huge chest cavity. It lasted far longer than a person could inhale. Then it stopped, leaving the forest even quieter than before. The cold suddenly felt warmer on my face, like something's breath had pushed warmer air outward. I forced myself to keep walking slow, steady. I'd made it another 20 yards when I heard the softest sound behind me. Snow shifting, not compressed, not kicked, shifted, like weight settling into fresh powder. I turned again. The gate was just a gate. The dark beside it looked empty, but something in my chest tightened, as if my instincts recognized a shape my eyes couldn't quite register. I told myself to keep going, but my body disagreed. Every step felt heavier, as if stepping deeper into the forest meant stepping closer to something waiting patiently for me. So I turned around fully and walked back toward the truck. The snow around me held no tracks except my own. When I reached the gate, I slowed down. The air felt warmer here somehow, not comfortable but lived in, occupied. I stepped sideways around the gate and felt, for the briefest instant, the sense that someone tall leaned forward, close enough to reach. But nothing touched me. The feeling passed. I reached my truck, unlocked the door, climbed in, and shut everything out. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely fit the key into the ignition. Before starting the engine, I looked through the windshield. The gate stood at the edge of the headlight's reach. Snow drifted softly past it. The night felt normal again. But then, Just before I turned the key, something stepped into the edge of the light. Not fully visible, just enough to break the pattern of the shadows. A tall, narrow shape, too long in the arms, too still, too patient. Its outline blurred against the darkness like it didn't belong in the light. It didn't move, didn't walk forward, didn't breathe loudly. It just waited, watching the truck, watching me. I started the engine in a panic. The headlights brightened. The shape didn't flinch. It stayed exactly where it stood, right at the threshold between light and dark. I put the truck in reverse. As I pulled away, the shape stepped back into the darkness, not jerking, not vanishing, just easing backward, slowly, calmly, as if it had all the time in the world. I drove straight home without looking in the mirrors. The next morning, I returned in daylight, telling myself it had been shadows, exhaustion, imagination. There were no footprints, none, not near the gate, not beside the trail, not anywhere the shape had stood, but the snow on the metal of the gate was melted in 5 long vertical streaks, as if something tall had rested its hands there for a very, very long time. I never visited that trailhead again. And sometimes, late at night, when the world goes completely quiet, I'll think about that shape standing at the boundary, patient, silent, waiting for someone else who stays too long after the sun goes down, waiting for another traveler to mistake the forest for a safe place, waiting for the gate to open again,